The most expensive mistake a billionaire can make is assuming he is the smartest person in the room. Daniel Whitmore believed that rule applied to everyone but him. The rain traced slow lines down the tall glass windows of the Manhattan restaurant, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and silver, while inside the air carried the soft hum of quiet deals and expensive laughter. Daniel sat at the center of a long walnut table, a Swiss watch resting against his cuff, its polished steel catching the chandelier light each time he lifted his hand. $82 million had moved with a signature an hour ago. The ink was barely dry. Around him, partners leaned back in leather chairs, relaxed, impressed, predictable. He liked predictable. Clara Bennett moved between tables with steady steps, her black apron tied neatly, a notepad tucked at her waist. She was not part of the conversation, but she heard enough of it. Hedge ratios. Market corrections. A new tech acquisition out in Palo Alto. She refilled water glasses without interrupting, placed a fresh cup of coffee near Daniel's right hand, and noticed he hadn't touched the first one. It had already gone cold. Daniel glanced at her name tag as she turned to leave. Clara. He smirked slightly, the kind of expression that came from long practice. Clara, he said, loud enough for the table to hear. You work around money every night. Give me some financial advice. I'm feeling reckless. A few men chuckled. Someone added, yeah, what's your hot stock tip? It was a game to him. He tested people the way other men tasted wine. He believed pressure revealed quality. Clara paused. Not frozen. Not flustered. Just paused. She turned back slowly, meeting his eyes without challenge, without apology. The rain tapped softly against the glass behind her. Sir, she said calmly, her voice even. Diversification doesn't protect you from ego. The laughter stopped. It didn't fade. It stopped. Daniel's fingers remained wrapped around the coffee cup, though he no longer felt its temperature. One of the partners shifted in his seat. Another cleared his throat. Daniel blinked once, as if recalibrating. Excuse me, he said, not angry, not yet. Curious. Clara didn't rush to explain. She didn't smile either. You can spread risk across sectors, she continued, steady as before. But if every decision is built on proving you're the smartest person in the room, that's a concentration problem. The words were simple. No jargon. No theatrics. Just precise. Daniel leaned back slowly, studying her as though she had just spoken in a language he recognized but hadn't expected to hear here. Outside, a yellow cab rolled past in the rain, tires hissing on wet pavement. Inside, the table waited for him to laugh it off. He didn't. Instead, he asked, and what exactly makes you think that applies to me? Clara glanced at the untouched coffee, then back at him. Because you already signed the deal, she said quietly, and you're still asking for advice. For the first time that evening, Daniel Whitmore had nothing to add. Daniel did not look away from her. The question lingered between them like the last note of a piano key pressed too hard. Around the table, men who managed billions suddenly found interest in their water glasses. The rain outside grew steadier, a soft percussion against the glass wall overlooking Madison Avenue. Daniel set the coffee cup down carefully, as if precision might restore balance. You are assuming I need advice, he said at last, his tone measured, almost conversational. Clara folded her hands lightly in front of her apron. Everyone does, she replied. No edge. No challenge. Just fact. One of the partners attempted a laugh, thin and uncertain. Daniel does not exactly crowdsource strategy, he said. Daniel raised a hand slightly, silencing him without effort. His eyes never left Clara. All right, he said. If you think I am asking because I am unsure, tell me what I am missing. It was a shift so subtle most would not catch it. The joke had ended. The test had not. Clara glanced at the signed folder near his elbow, the corner of the contract still visible. You acquired a growth company in a cooling market, she said. High valuation. Strong narrative. But narrative is not cash flow. Daniel's jaw tightened almost invisibly. The acquisition had been public for less than 3 hours. That is a broad statement, he replied. Markets reward vision. Clara nodded once. They do. Until they do not. She reached for the cold coffee pot on her tray and gently refilled his cup, though he had not asked. Steam rose briefly, then faded. You paid a premium because you wanted to close before your competitor, she continued. Speed can be strength. It can also be ego wearing a stopwatch. The man to Daniel's left shifted in his seat. "How would you know the terms?" he asked, sharper than before. Clara met his glance politely. "Public filings disclose more than people expect," she said. "And your interview this afternoon filled in the rest." Daniel remembered the interview. The confident smile. The comment about moving fast before others could react. He had called it decisive leadership. Clara called it something else. "You think I rushed," he said. "I think," Clara answered softly, "that you wanted to win more than you wanted to be right." The words did not accuse. They revealed. Silence returned, heavier this time. Daniel leaned back, studying her as though recalculating an equation. "What would you have done differently?" he asked. The question was clean. No sarcasm. No audience performance. Clara did not hesitate. "I would have let my competitor overpay first," she said. "Then I would have bought their regret at a discount." For a moment, Daniel forgot the room, forgot the rain, forgot the watch pressing against his wrist. He saw the scenario unfold in his mind. The patience, the leverage, the quiet advantage. He exhaled slowly. "You speak like someone who has sat on the other side of the table," he said. Clara offered the smallest hint of a smile. "I speak like someone who has watched powerful men confuse movement with progress," she replied. Daniel looked down at the fresh coffee. Steam no longer rose. He realized he had not tasted a single sip all night. Daniel rested his forearms lightly on the edge of the table, the polished wood reflecting the faint outline of his watch. He was no longer performing for the room. The partners sensed it. Conversations at neighboring tables continued, but at this one the air had shifted, as if someone had opened a window no one else could see. "You have been watching powerful men for a long time," Daniel said quietly. It was not a question. Clara adjusted the silverware at the place setting beside him, aligning the fork with careful precision. "Long enough," she replied. Daniel studied her face, searching for hesitation, for exaggeration, for anything that would reduce her words to chance. He found none. "Where did you study finance?" he asked. The question came gently, but it carried weight. Clara paused for half a second. "Not to invent, to choose." "Columbia," she said. "Graduate program. Quantitative focus." One of the men at the table inhaled sharply. Daniel's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes did. "And yet you are here," he said. Clara nodded once. "Yes, sir." He waited for explanation. She did not offer one immediately. Instead, she lifted the signed acquisition folder and placed it squarely back in front of him, as if returning a chess piece to its correct position. "I stepped away 2 years ago," she said at last. "My mother's health required more time than a trading desk allows." The words were simple. No appeal for sympathy. Just a statement of fact. Daniel felt the faintest tightening in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation in a room where he usually dictated the emotional temperature. "You left a 6-figure career to wait tables," one partner said, disbelief barely concealed. Clara met his gaze calmly. "I left a salary," she corrected. "I did not leave my knowledge." Silence followed, deeper than before. Outside, headlights streaked across the rain-slick street. Inside, Daniel reached for his coffee again. It was warm this time. He took a slow sip, buying himself a moment. "If you saw the risk so clearly," he said, "why not stay and outmaneuver it?" Clara's eyes softened, though her posture remained straight. "Because not every decision is about maximizing return," she answered. "Some are about protecting what cannot be replaced." Daniel looked at the contract once more. $82 million. Analysts, advisors, models built on layers of data. And yet the clearest assessment of his position tonight had come from someone carrying a tray. "Tell me something," he said, lowering his voice. "If this deal falters, what will it cost me?" Clara did not look at the numbers. She looked at him. "Reputation," she said. "Confidence. The quiet authority that lets you walk into a room without proving anything." The words landed without force, yet they settled heavily. Daniel realized that was the true leverage. Not money, not market share. Perception. He glanced around the table at the men who had laughed earlier. They were watching him now, waiting to see which version of him would answer. The man who needed to win, or the man willing to listen. Clara stepped back slightly, giving him space. She did not press. She did not sell. She simply waited. And for the first time in years, Daniel Whitmore felt the unfamiliar weight of being the one evaluated. The room did not rush him. It waited. Daniel felt it in the stillness of the men around him, in the soft clink of a glass being set down 2 tables away, in the quiet persistence of rain against 40 feet of glass. He had built his reputation on decisive answers, on speaking before doubt had time to form. Now he chose silence. He turned the signed contract slightly, as if adjusting the angle might reveal something new. Reputation can recover, he said finally, his voice steady but lower than before. Markets fluctuate. Headlines fade. Clara did not move closer. She did not retreat. They do, she agreed. But confidence is different. When a leader hesitates internally, the team feels it before the numbers show it. Daniel's eyes lifted. That was closer to the bone than he expected. He thought of the board meeting scheduled for Monday morning. 12 directors. 3 skeptical. All watching for weakness. You assume I am hesitating, he said. Clara's expression remained composed. You asked what it would cost, she replied. I answered what you value most. One of the partners shifted uncomfortably. Another checked his phone without unlocking it. The performance was over. Daniel tapped his finger once against the table, a habit he had when recalculating. All right, he said. Let us assume there is ego involved. What is the corrective action? The question was deliberate. Strategic. Not defensive. Clara folded her hands lightly behind her back. Slow down the narrative, she said. Do not defend the acquisition publicly. Let analysts debate it. Distance yourself from the excitement. Signal discipline. Daniel considered it. He had planned 3 interviews next week. A magazine cover. A celebratory internal memo. Movement. Momentum. Proof of victory. You are suggesting restraint, he said. I am suggesting authority, Clara answered. True authority does not rush to justify itself. The words settled between them like a weight placed carefully at the center of a scale. Daniel glanced at his watch. The second hand moved with mechanical certainty, indifferent to human pride. If I follow your advice, he asked, what do I gain? Clara's gaze did not waver. Time, she said. And options. If the numbers outperform, you appear patient and strategic. If they falter, you appear measured and cautious. Either way, you are not emotionally attached. Emotionally attached. Daniel leaned back slowly. He had told himself the acquisition was purely strategic, data-driven, rational. Yet he remembered the competitor's smirk at the last conference. The subtle challenge in his tone. He had wanted to win. You make it sound simple, he said. Clara gave a small shake of her head. It is not simple, she replied. It is disciplined. A server at a nearby table laughed softly at something unrelated. Life in the restaurant continued, unaware that a quiet recalibration was unfolding in one corner. Daniel looked at the woman standing before him in a plain black apron, posture straight, voice calm, no trace of performance. He realized something unexpected. She was not trying to impress him. She was protecting a standard. And in that moment, he understood that the real test had never been hers. It had been his. Daniel remained seated long after the last sentence settled into the air. The men around him were no longer smiling. They were watching, measuring, recalibrating their understanding of the room. Clara stood with quiet composure, her hands relaxed, her posture unchanged. She had not raised her voice. She had not taken a single step forward to claim ground. Yet the balance had shifted. Daniel reached for the leather check presenter near the edge of the table and opened it slowly. The total was insignificant to him, a number that would not register against his net worth, yet tonight it felt symbolic. He placed his credit card inside, but did not close it. Instead, he looked up at her again. Tell me something honestly, he said. Why answer at all? Most people would have laughed and walked away. Clara considered the question carefully. The rain had softened now, thinning into a fine mist against the windows. Because influence does not require a title, she said. And silence can look like agreement. Daniel absorbed that. He thought about the meetings where no one challenged him, the nods that followed his declarations, the comfortable echo of approval. He had mistaken compliance for respect more than once. You realize, one of the partners interjected cautiously, that advising a room like this carries risk. Clara met his gaze politely. So does staying quiet when you see a preventable mistake, she replied. There was no arrogance in her tone, only clarity. Daniel closed the check presenter and slid it toward her. What would you do, he asked, if you were sitting in my seat Monday morning? The question was different now. Not hypothetical, not theatrical. Clara glanced briefly at the skyline beyond the glass, at the city that never truly paused. I would walk into that boardroom without defending myself, she said. I would ask sharper questions than anyone else. I would invite dissent instead of dismissing it. And I would make it clear that the goal is not to be right first. It is to be right in the end. The simplicity of it unsettled him more than any complex model could have. He imagined the directors leaning forward, expecting a victory speech, and instead hearing measured inquiry. He imagined the strength required to admit uncertainty without losing authority. It was a different kind of dominance, one built on control of self rather than control of others. Daniel stood slowly from his chair. The men at the table followed his lead, instinctively. Power still recognized power. He removed his card from the presenter and signed the receipt with steady handwriting. The tip he left was generous, but it was not the point. He looked at Clara one last time. No smirk, no test hidden behind his eyes. You chose to protect what cannot be replaced, he said quietly. That is discipline. Clara offered a small nod. Discipline is simply remembering what matters before the market tells you otherwise, she replied. Daniel slipped his card back into his wallet and adjusted his cuff. For the first time that evening, he felt no need to prove anything. The rain had nearly stopped. The city lights were sharp again, clear and defined. As he walked toward the exit, he understood something that numbers had never taught him. Wealth amplifies who you already are. Character decides whether the amplification becomes noise or legacy. The restaurant doors closed softly behind Daniel as he stepped into the night, and for a moment he did not call for his driver. The pavement shimmered under the streetlights, rainwater collecting along the curb in thin silver lines. He stood there, breathing in the cool Manhattan air, listening to the distant hum of traffic. Inside, through the tall glass, he could still see Clara moving between tables with the same steady rhythm, as if nothing unusual had occurred. No announcement, no triumph, just quiet competence. Daniel adjusted his coat and finally walked toward the waiting black sedan. The driver opened the door, but Daniel paused before getting in. He looked back once more at the restaurant, at the corner table where laughter had turned into reflection. Then he slid into the back seat and gave a simple instruction. Home. The car moved smoothly through the city, past brownstones and office towers, past illuminated billboards promising certainty in bold letters. Daniel leaned back against the leather seat and replayed the evening in his mind. Not the acquisition, not the signatures. Her words. Diversification does not protect you from ego. The phrase echoed differently now, less like criticism and more like calibration. He thought about Monday morning. The boardroom. The long oak table. The directors expecting momentum. He imagined walking in without the rehearsed speech, without the defensive slides prepared by his communications team. He imagined asking questions instead of delivering conclusions. The idea unsettled him, but it also felt strangely steady, like shifting from running to standing firmly on both feet. Across town, Clara finished her shift just after 10:30. She untied her apron in the quiet of the staff room and folded it carefully, placing it inside her locker. Her reflection in the narrow mirror showed no trace of the evening's tension, only calm. She slipped on a light coat and stepped outside into the damp air. The rain had stopped completely. The city smelled clean, washed. She did not check her phone for messages from the dining room. She did not expect any. The conversation had not been about opportunity. It had been about alignment. As she walked toward the subway entrance, she thought briefly of her mother waiting at home, of medical appointments and insurance forms, of responsibilities that did not appear on balance sheets. She felt no regret about the path she had chosen. Knowledge did not expire because it was not displayed. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Daniel's apartment overlooking Central Park. He stood by the glass with a cup of coffee, watching early runners trace the paths below. His phone buzzed with congratulatory messages about the acquisition. He did not respond immediately. Instead, he opened his calendar and canceled 2 media interviews scheduled for the week. He drafted a brief email to his board, Monday's agenda revised. Discussion first. Celebration later. He read it twice before. Sending. It was concise, measured, different. As he set his phone down, he noticed something subtle. The urge to prove had quieted. In its place was something steadier. Not doubt, discipline. And somewhere beneath the skyline, a woman who wore a black apron at night continued her day without knowing that a boardroom conversation had already shifted because she chose not to stay silent. Monday morning arrived with a pale wash of sunlight over Midtown, the kind that made glass towers look almost transparent, as if power itself could be seen through. Daniel walked into the boardroom at 9 sharp, no entourage, no stack of glossy presentation folders under his arm. 12 directors sat around the long oak table, coffee cups steaming, tablets open, expectations sharpened. They were prepared for momentum, for victory language, for confident projections stretched across a 70-inch screen. Instead, Daniel took his seat, placed a single legal pad in front of him, and folded his hands. Before we discuss growth targets, he began evenly. I want to examine downside exposure. A few eyebrows lifted. One director slowly lowered his pen. This was not the script they had anticipated. Daniel did not rush to fill the silence. He let it expand, steady and deliberate. We moved quickly, he continued. Speed can create advantage. It can also conceal blind spots. I want those blind spots identified now, not defended later. The words felt unfamiliar in his mouth, yet solid. Across the table, a director who had privately questioned the acquisition leaned forward. You are inviting critique? She asked carefully. Daniel met her gaze without tension. I am inviting precision, he replied. What followed was not confrontation. It was examination. Questions replaced applause. Assumptions were turned over, not protected. When one board member challenged the revenue forecast, Daniel did not counter immediately. He asked for alternative scenarios. When another suggested a phased integration rather than an aggressive rollout, Daniel nodded and requested modeling by the end of the week. The room adjusted. Energy shifted from performance to problem solving. By the time the meeting concluded 90 minutes later, the tone was not celebratory. It was aligned. As directors gathered their materials, one of the senior members paused beside Daniel. That was different, he said quietly. Daniel allowed a faint smile. Different is not weakness, he answered. It is control. Meanwhile, several subway stops downtown, Clara sat in a modest medical waiting room beside her mother, reviewing paperwork clipped neatly to a thin folder. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. Her phone remained face down in her bag. She had no expectation that Monday would carry her voice into rooms she would never see. When her mother was called in, Clara rose with her, steady as always. In another part of the city, a financial news alert flashed across trading desks. Whitmore Capital revises acquisition strategy, signals phased integration and risk review. Analysts described the move as disciplined, measured, mature. Daniel read the alert from his office window overlooking Central Park and felt no urge to respond publicly. He understood something now that he had not understood before. Restraint was not retreat. It was strength without noise. That evening, as the sun lowered behind the skyline, Daniel found himself thinking not about market reactions, but about a quiet voice in a rain-lit restaurant. He realized that power tested others by instinct. Character tested itself by choice. And in choosing to listen instead of dominate, he had not diminished his authority. He had refined it. 3 weeks later, the numbers began to speak. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. The phased integration slowed expenses by 12% compared to the original projection. Market volatility that had shaken similar acquisitions barely brushed Whitmore Capital. Analysts who had predicted overextension revised their tone. Words like disciplined and calculated replaced aggressive and impulsive. Daniel read each report without satisfaction on his face, only recognition. The adjustment had not guaranteed success. It had created stability, and stability had created trust. On a quiet Thursday evening, Daniel returned to the same restaurant on Madison Avenue. Not with partners, not with clients. Alone. The rain was absent this time. The sky above the city was clear, deep blue, fading into early night. He requested the same corner table. The host recognized him instantly. Power still carried visibility. Clara was working again. When she approached his table, her expression did not change. No surprise, no assumption, only professional calm. Good evening, she said. Daniel nodded slightly. Good evening, Clara. He did not mention the boardroom. He did not reference headlines. He ordered a simple dinner and a black coffee. This time, he drank it while it was still hot. After a few minutes, he spoke. The integration plan was revised, he said evenly. Clara sat down. A glass of water without reacting. That sounds measured, she replied. Daniel allowed a small breath that almost resembled a laugh. Measured was not my first instinct, he admitted. She looked at him then, not as a waitress serving a customer, but as a person evaluating another person. Instinct can be trained, she said. Ego does not disappear. It is redirected. Daniel studied her words. He realized he had not come back for validation. He had come back for alignment. You were right about one thing, he said quietly. Inviting dissent did not weaken my position. It strengthened it. Clara gave a slight nod. Confidence that cannot tolerate questions is not confidence, she replied. The restaurant buzzed gently around them. Silverware chimed against plates. Conversations flowed. Life moved forward without ceremony. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small envelope on the table. It was unsealed. There is a position opening at the firm, he said. Strategic risk assessment. Flexible schedule. Competitive salary. It would not require you to abandon what matters to you. Clara glanced at the envelope, but did not touch it immediately. The offer rested between them, simple and substantial. I appreciate the respect behind it, she said after a moment. But my timeline is not driven by salary. Daniel did not withdraw the envelope. He nodded slowly. Then consider it an option, he said. Not an expectation. Clara finally placed her hand on the envelope, not claiming it, only steadying it. Options are valuable, she said softly. So is knowing when you are already where you need to be. Daniel understood that answer more deeply than he would have a month ago. He finished his coffee before it cooled, left the envelope behind without insistence, and stood to leave. Long across the floor, and felt no surge of triumph. What he felt instead was balance. The kind that does not fluctuate with applause. Weeks passed before he returned again to the restaurant, not out of impulse, but intention. It was early evening. The city carried that crisp October air that sharpened every light along Madison Avenue. Inside, the same corner table waited beneath warm chandeliers. Clara moved through the dining room with the same steady rhythm, unchanged by headlines she had never followed. When she approached, there was recognition in her eyes, but not expectation. Daniel did not order immediately. The board approved the revised structure unanimously, he said, his tone even. Clara nodded once. Unanimity earned through questions lasts longer than agreement earned through volume, she replied. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. You turned a joke into a strategy, he said. Clara shook her head gently. No, she answered. You chose to listen. The distinction mattered. Daniel understood that now. He reached into his jacket pocket once more, not for an envelope this time, but for a folded sheet of paper. He placed it on the table between them. It was not a contract. It was a scholarship endowment, newly established in his firm's foundation, funding graduate finance students who needed flexible schedules to care for family. No press release. No public announcement. Just policy. Clara read the first line silently, her expression composed but thoughtful. This was not necessary, she said softly. Perhaps not, Daniel replied. But it is aligned. She looked at him then, not as a billionaire, not as a customer, but as a man who had recalibrated his compass. Alignment is sustainable, she said. Daniel stood after finishing his coffee, leaving no dramatic gesture behind. As he prepared to step back into the cool Manhattan night, he paused. You once said influence does not require a title, he said. I understand that now. Clara met his gaze steadily. And respect, she replied, is the best long-term investment. Daniel stepped outside, the city alive around him, headlights moving like quiet constellations along the avenue. He felt no need to announce growth, no urge to prove evolution. The transformation had not been loud. It had been deliberate. Inside, Clara returned to her work, steady as ever, aware that the most powerful shifts rarely happen on stages or in headlines. They happen in moments when pride yields to principle. In the end, the market rewarded strategy. But character was what made it last.